Arizona, November 5th, 1975. 6 men are driving home through the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest after a long day of logging work. Dark road, dense trees on both sides. Nothing remarkable about the drive except for one thing. A light in the sky, not a plane, not a helicopter, not anything these men had a name for. Something hovering just above the tree line, pulsing with a strange amber-orange glow. Completely still, in a way that moving aircraft simply aren't. Most people would have kept driving. Travis Walton didn't. He jumps out of the truck and walks toward it. His crew is screaming at him from the windows to get back in. He doesn't turn around. He gets close enough that something in the air starts vibrating. A low hum that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And then, a beam of blue-white light slams into his chest, throws him backward through the air. His crew tears down that road in pure panic, leaving nothing behind but dust and darkness. And Travis Walton is gone, not lost in the forest, not hiding, not wandered off, just gone. He would be missing for 5 days. And what he claimed happened during those 5 days has been argued over, investigated, disputed, and never fully explained for nearly 50 years. This is the true story behind Fire in the Sky, and it is considerably stranger than most people remember. Travis Walton and his crew worked for a forestry contractor named Mike Rogers. 6 men in total. Mike, Travis, David, John, Ken, and Dwayne. All from Snowflake, Arizona. A small community, a tight circle. These weren't strangers thrown together on a job. Some of them had known each other their entire lives. That matters later. That evening, the crew was heading home later than usual. Travis spotted the glow first through the trees. There was a moment of debate in the truck. Some wanted to stop. Some wanted nothing to do with whatever that light was. Travis was the one who acted before the argument finished. He got out. He walked toward it. And the moment that beam hit him, everything changed for all 6 of them. The crew drove away in terror. Then, roughly a quarter-mile down the road, Mike stopped. He couldn't leave his friend. They turned around and went back. Travis was gone. No body. No footprints leading away into the trees. No sign of any struggle. Just an empty road and a dark forest. And 6 men standing in it, with absolutely nothing to show for what had just happened. They drove to the nearest town and called for help. And that's when things got complicated in an entirely different direction. Because when you walk into a police station and tell officers that your friend was hit by a beam of light from an unidentified object and vanished, the first thought that crosses their minds is not alien abduction. The first thought is murder. Officers from the Navajo County Sheriff's Department interrogated the crew separately through the night. And here is where the story gets genuinely difficult to dismiss with a simple explanation. Their accounts matched, not in a rehearsed way, in the specific, messy, consistent way that separate witnesses to the same real event tend to match when questioned independently. These 6 men who had just experienced something terrifying were now being treated as suspects in the potential killing of their missing friend. And all they had to offer was a story that sounded impossible. The case went national almost immediately. The crew submitted to polygraph examinations. Results were mixed depending on which analysis you read and who administered the tests. Skeptics pointed to inconsistencies. Supporters pointed to the overall pattern of consistency. What is harder to wave away cleanly is how their accounts held together across separate interrogations, conducted by people who were actively looking for the lie. For 5 days, Travis Walton was simply not there. No trace, no contact, nothing. Then on the 6th day, a phone call came through to a relative's home in Snowflake. It was Travis, barely coherent, disoriented. He was found at a gas station in the nearby town of Heber, stumbling, dehydrated, confused about what day it was. He had lost 5 days with no explanation for where they went. What he did have were memories, fragmented at first, then more detailed as the days and weeks passed. And what those memories described was something that the film Fire in the Sky would later attempt to recreate, with significant creative liberties, but never quite capture in full. Travis described waking on a surface in a rounded, low-ceilinged room with dim amber lighting, 3 figures nearby, small, large, dark eyes, features that didn't move the way human features move. He panicked, grabbed something from a nearby surface, thinking it might be useful as a weapon. The figures moved back and left the room. Then something that appeared more human entered, taller, wearing some kind of helmet, led him through a corridor into a larger space. And then, a gap, a silence in the memory he has never been able to fill regardless of how many times he has tried. The next thing he knew, he was on a road outside Heber, cold pavement under him, a craft disappearing into the sky above. Now, here is where we need to be honest about what we know and what we don't. Travis Walton's account has been examined from every direction for close to 50 years. There are serious researchers who find the consistency of the testimony compelling. There are equally serious skeptics who have built detailed alternative explanations: psychological, sociological, situational. The film itself takes considerable creative license, particularly in the abduction sequence, which portrays a level of physical horror that goes well beyond what Travis himself described in his own account. What becomes genuinely difficult to construct a clean counter-narrative around is this: 6 witnesses, separate interrogations, consistent core accounts across 5 decades. A man who has never quietly retired this story, despite having every practical reason to do so. The scrutiny, the ridicule, the decades of having his credibility openly questioned. The simplest version of the hoax theory requires all 6 men to have coordinated and maintained a perfect lie for half a century without a single one of them, not one, ever breaking under the weight of it. That doesn't prove anything. But it does make you think. And if stories like this, real cases that still don't have clear answers, pull you in, make sure you're subscribed, because this one only gets stranger from here. Back to the film. Fire in the Sky came out in 1993. D.B. Sweeney played Travis. Robert Patrick played Mike Rogers. And the most interesting creative decision the filmmakers made was to anchor most of the story not in space, but on the ground. In the 5 days Travis was missing, because that's where the most human part of this story actually lives. Mike Rogers in particular carries the film in a way that holds up. He was the one driving. He was the one who made the split-second decision to accelerate away from whatever that light was. And even though he turned back almost immediately, even though it was only minutes before he returned, Travis was already gone. And Mike had to live inside that for 5 days, not knowing if his friend was alive, not knowing if he was about to be charged with murder, not knowing if anyone in that small town or anywhere else was going to believe what he and his crew actually saw. The interrogation scenes in the film earn their tension precisely because they stay grounded. Fluorescent lights, folding chairs, a sheriff's deputy across a table from a man who sounds either guilty or insane, and might be neither. The claustrophobia of being completely truthful and completely unbelievable at the same time. That specific feeling, that's what the film gets right. The abduction sequence, when it finally arrives near the end, is something else entirely. Travis wakes suspended in what appears to be some kind of organic material. Wheat. Enclosed. He tears himself free and drops onto a hard floor. The environment around him doesn't follow the visual logic of most science fiction. Not the clean corridors of classic space films. Not mechanical horror. something in between, biological and constructed simultaneously. Wrong in a way that registers before you can identify why. The figures he encounters offer no communication, no reassurance, no indication that his fear or confusion registers to them as anything requiring a response. He is not a guest in that room. The sequence runs roughly 12 minutes and contains almost no dialogue. Just a man alone in a space that makes no sense, trying to survive it, with no information and no tools. It remains, even measured against everything produced in the 30 years since, one of the more genuinely unsettling depictions of this kind of encounter in mainstream cinema. Partly because of what it shows, mostly because of what it refuses to explain. Travis Walton has told this story publicly for nearly 50 years. Books, interviews, documentary appearances, hypnotic regression sessions attempting to recover what his conscious memory cannot reach. The core of what he describes has not changed. In 1993, coinciding with the film's release, the original crew submitted to another round of polygraph testing. The results followed a broadly similar pattern to the original examinations decades earlier. Researchers on both sides of the debate have continued analyzing those results ever since and have not reached consensus. What sits underneath all of the analysis and counter-analysis is something simpler and harder to resolve. 6 men from a small town in Arizona have spent the better part of their lives attached to a story they didn't ask for. It has followed all of them, defined how strangers see them, complicated their relationships and their reputations in ways that a fabrication, particularly one that never paid off in any significant material way for any of them, would be extraordinarily difficult to sustain across this much time. Something happened in that forest on November 5th, 1975. Whether it was what Travis Walton believes it was, whether the gaps in his memory contain what he thinks they contain, may never be fully resolved. But the sky above those trees that night was not ordinary, and not one of those 6 men has ever claimed otherwise. Not in 50 years, not once. If Fire in the Sky left you thinking about it long after the screen went dark, that's exactly why this story has lasted as long as it has. Subscribe and hit the bell, because next week we're going somewhere just as deep and just as unresolved. And drop one thing in the comments right now. Do you think Travis Walton was telling the truth? Or is there another explanation you find more convincing? The forest is still there. The road is still there. And whatever flew over it that night never left a single piece of itself behind. Just 6 men, and a story nobody has been able to finish.